She didn't look like someone important when she walked through those glass doors. Her jeans were simple, her sneakers were worn, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. Most of the employees barely even glanced at her. Some smirked, others whispered behind her back. They didn't see power, they didn't see success. All they saw was someone they thought didn't belong in their polished, high-end corporate world. One manager even laughed quietly, shaking his head, whispering, "She must be lost." But what none of them knew was that by the end of the day, the woman they were mocking would be sitting in the CEO's chair, holding the future of every single one of them in her hands, the very future they thought they owned. Because sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one you never see coming. Stay with me, because what happened next, no one in that building could have ever imagined. Charlotte Monroe wasn't born into wealth or privilege. She grew up in a small, quiet town where opportunities were few, but dreams were big. Her mother, Grace Monroe, worked 2 jobs, one at a diner during the day and another cleaning offices at night, just to keep food on the table. From the very beginning, Charlotte learned that hard work wasn't an option. It was a way of life. Unlike many kids her age, Charlotte never cared about fancy brands or shiny cars. She cared about kindness, about respect, about doing what's right even when no one is watching. By the time she was 14, Charlotte had already started helping her mom after school, picking up small shifts wherever she could, babysitting, waitressing, even mowing lawns in the summers. People in town knew her as the girl with the biggest heart and the brightest smile, even when her shoes were worn out and her backpack was patched up with stitches. When it came time for college, Charlotte earned a full scholarship. Not because of connections, not because of money, but because she worked harder than anyone else. Even then, surrounded by students with expensive clothes and powerful family names, she never let herself feel small. Charlotte knew something they didn't. It's not what's on the outside that defines you, it's what you carry on the inside. After graduating with honors, she didn't chase glamour or titles. She chose to start from the very bottom, working in restaurants, small offices, even warehouses, learning every piece of how a business runs. For Charlotte, success wasn't about climbing a ladder quickly. It was about understanding every step of it, so that when her time came, she would be ready to stand tall, not just for herself, but for everyone who ever felt overlooked. She didn't wear fancy suits. She didn't show off degrees or awards. Charlotte believed that real leaders don't need to announce themselves. They are recognized by their actions. And on that fateful day, when she stepped into Westbridge Enterprises, she wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to change everything. But little did she know, her first challenge wasn't fixing the company's profits. It was surviving the judgment of the very people she was sent to lead. Westbridge Enterprises used to be the pride of the city, a company built on hard work, honesty, and service to the everyday customer. But over the years, things changed. New leadership came in, leadership that cared more about profits than people. The halls that once buzzed with teamwork and excitement grew cold and silent. Employees were no longer seen as the heart of the company. They became numbers. Customers stopped being valued. They became transactions. Slowly, quietly, the soul of Westbridge began to rot from the inside out. Profits dipped. Good workers left, and for the first time in decades, Westbridge Enterprises stood at the edge of collapse. The board of directors, desperate to save what was left, knew they needed someone new, but not just another polished executive with a glossy resume. They needed someone different, someone who understood what real leadership meant, someone who still believed that companies are built by people, not power, someone who could rebuild Westbridge from its broken foundation, not with money, but with dignity. That someone was Charlotte Monroe. After months of quiet discussions, interviews, and background checks, the board made a bold decision. Charlotte would become the new CEO of Westbridge Enterprises. But before they announced anything publicly, they had a special request. They asked Charlotte to visit the corporate headquarters, not in a limousine, not in a power suit, but just as herself. They wanted her to see, with her own eyes, the culture that had taken root behind the polished glass walls. No name tag, no announcement, no one knowing who she really was. Just a simple woman walking into a broken empire, about to find out just how much work there was to be done. Charlotte stepped out of her modest car, took a deep breath, and looked up at the towering glass building before her. Westbridge Enterprises, the company she was about to lead. She chose her outfit carefully that morning. Plain jeans, a simple white blouse, worn sneakers, and her hair tied back loosely. No designer purse, no flashy jewelry. Nothing that screamed power or importance, just Charlotte, exactly as she had always been. As she pushed open the heavy glass doors and stepped inside, the atmosphere hit her like a wall, cold, distant, mechanical. Employees moved briskly past each other, avoiding eye contact. The front desk receptionist barely looked up from her phone. Charlotte smiled warmly and approached. "Good morning," she said softly. "Could you please direct me to the HR office?" The receptionist glanced at Charlotte's casual clothes, raised an eyebrow, and sighed, as if Charlotte's presence alone was an inconvenience. "We're very busy right now," the receptionist said sharply, barely hiding her irritation. "If you're looking for temp work or deliveries, try the back entrance." Charlotte felt the sting of those words, but stayed calm. She simply nodded and moved aside, taking a seat in the waiting area. As she waited, she heard the whispers starting to spread like wildfire. Two sharply dressed young women, standing nearby, giggled and whispered loudly enough for Charlotte to hear. "Maybe she's here to fix the coffee machines. Or maybe she's someone's nanny who got lost." Charlotte lowered her eyes to the floor for a moment, feeling the old, familiar ache of judgment. Not because of her skills, not because of her mind, but because of the clothes on her back. As she sat silently, another employee, a man in an expensive gray suit, sauntered past. He gave her a brief, disdainful glance and chuckled under his breath. "Wrong place, sweetheart," he muttered, shaking his head as he walked away. Minutes later, Charlotte rose from her chair and tried again. She approached a nearby hallway where two mid-level managers were chatting casually. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Could you point me toward HR?" They turned, looked her up and down, and barely disguised their amusement. One of them, a man with slicked back hair and an oversized gold watch, smirked. "Honey, HR doesn't do walk-ins. You'll need an appointment. Maybe try next week, if you're lucky." Charlotte forced a smile, thanking them, even as a small knot tightened in her chest. She continued walking down the hallway, feeling the stairs follow her like shadows. Conversations stopped when she passed. People nudged each other, exchanging looks. In a place where appearances ruled, Charlotte, with her quiet presence and simple clothes, was invisible, or worse, considered an outsider. No one offered help. No one offered kindness. Charlotte realized that the sickness running through Westbridge wasn't just poor leadership. It was a culture of arrogance, a place where people measured worth by brands and appearances, not by character or contribution. And if she had any doubts about whether change was needed, those doubts had just been shattered. But Charlotte wasn't angry. Number. She was determined to prove that true greatness never wears a label, and that in the end, it's not about the clothes you wear, it's about the heart you carry into every room you walk into. And very soon, the very people who had laughed at her would be standing when she entered the room, not because of her outfit, but because of the power, dignity, and leadership they failed to see. Charlotte continued walking down the endless polished hallway, her footsteps quiet, but her heart loud with every beat. She had seen enough to know the culture at Westbridge was even more toxic than the reports had said. But just when she thought the judgment couldn't cut deeper, it did. As she paused near the executive lounge, a group of managers stood gathered around. Expensive suits, designer watches, loud laughter filling the air. One of them, a tall man with slicked back hair and a smug smile, noticed Charlotte. His name was Mr. Harris, head of one of the company's most important departments. He looked her over slowly, from her sneakers to her loose ponytail, and smirked for everyone to see. Then, in a voice dripping with sarcasm, loud enough for the whole group to hear, he said, "Hey there, sweetheart. If you're looking for the janitor's closet, it's down the hall. You'll find a mop with your name on it." Laughter exploded from the group, sharp and cruel. Charlotte felt the sting, not just from the words, but from the complete disregard for simple human decency. She could have snapped back. She could have thrown her future title in his face, but Charlotte simply smiled, a calm, measured smile, the kind that carried a quiet power, deeper than any insult could touch. Without a word, she nodded politely, turned, and walked away, leaving Mr. Harris and his circle of laughter behind her. But inside, Charlotte made a silent promise. They would remember this moment, not because of the way she looked, not because of the clothes she wore, but because of who she truly was, the woman who would soon be sitting in the highest office in the building, with the power to change everything they thought they controlled. And when that moment came, Charlotte knew it wouldn't be anger they would feel. It would be regret. Stay with me. Because the real shock was still about to unfold, and it would leave the entire company reeling. An hour later, the atmosphere inside Westbridge Enterprises buzzed with excitement. Word had spread. The new CEO is arriving today. Employees straightened their ties, smoothed their dresses, and gathered near the main conference room, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever would be taking over the company. Whispers filled the air. Speculations ran wild. "It's probably some Wall Street billionaire," one said. "Maybe a famous executive," another guessed. No one, not a single person, even glanced toward the quiet woman in the simple blouse and jeans who now walked alongside the chairman toward the front of the room. But they were about to learn a lesson they would never forget. The chairman tapped the microphone, and the room fell silent. "Good afternoon, everyone," he began. "Today is a new beginning for Westbridge Enterprises, a beginning built on new values, new leadership, and a return to what made this company great." He smiled, then turned to Charlotte. "It is my honor," he said, his voice strong, "to introduce you to your new CEO, Miss Charlotte Monroe." For a heartbeat, the room stayed frozen. Confused glances, awkward silence. Then, all at once, realization struck. Heads whipped around toward Charlotte, jaws dropped. Mr. Harris, standing smugly at the side of the room, went pale as a sheet. It was her, the woman they ignored, the woman they whispered about, the woman they laughed at. And now, she was their boss. Charlotte stepped forward, her simple outfit still plain, still unremarkable, but now, she carried herself like the force of a storm, calm, unshakable. She stood at the podium and looked out across the sea of stunned faces. When she spoke, her voice was steady, strong, and filled with quiet power. "Earlier today," Charlotte began, "I walked through these halls like any other visitor might, and what I saw and heard made it very clear why Westbridge lost its way." She paused, letting the silence hang heavy in the air. "Here," she continued, "people are judged not by their skills, not by their integrity, but by their clothes, their shoes, their appearance. And today, that ends." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some looked ashamed, others shifted uncomfortably. Charlotte's gaze stayed steady. "This company will no longer reward arrogance and vanity. We will reward kindness, work ethic, and respect. Values that never go out of style." She glanced briefly toward Mr. Harris, who now stood stiffly, his hands clenched. "Some of you treated me like I didn't belong," Charlotte said softly, her voice carrying through the silent room. "And if that's how you treat a stranger, imagine how many good people we've pushed away." She smiled then, not a cruel smile, but a knowing one. "It's time to rebuild Westbridge into a place where every person, no matter what they wear or where they come from, is treated with dignity." A long, deep silence filled the room. And for the first time, in a very long time, Westbridge Enterprises felt a pulse of something real. Hope. Charlotte let the silence settle across the room, letting every heart beat a little louder, every guilty glance linger just a little longer. Then she spoke, not with anger, not with pride, but with the calm strength of someone who had lived through a lifetime of being underestimated and had risen anyway. "Today," Charlotte began, "you judged me by what you saw, by my jeans, by my sneakers, by the fact that I didn't walk in here wrapped in silk and gold." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the crowd. "You saw someone ordinary, maybe even someone you thought didn't deserve a second glance." A few people shifted uncomfortably, glancing down at their feet. Charlotte continued, her voice never rising, but cutting deeper with every word. "But real leadership, real strength, isn't worn on your body. It's built inside your heart. It's the patience to stay kind when others are cruel. It's the courage to stay humble when you have every reason not to." Charlotte leaned in slightly, her voice softer now, almost a whisper that somehow carried even further. "The world doesn't need more people who judge by appearances. It needs people who judge by character." The room stayed absolutely still. Charlotte straightened, her voice gaining warmth and hope. "Here at Westbridge, starting today, we will be building a culture where dignity is not earned by what you wear, but by how you treat the person standing next to you. We will be a company where the janitor gets the same respect as the CEO, where the woman in sneakers is treated no differently than the man in $1,000 shoes, where success is measured not by how many people you step over, but by how many you lift along the way." A soft murmur of agreement rolled through the employees. Heads nodded, some eyes even glistened with the beginnings of tears. Charlotte smiled, not a victorious smile, but a hopeful one. "We all deserve a place," she finished, her voice steady. "And at Westbridge Enterprises, every voice, every face, every dream will matter." And in that moment, something shifted in that once cold building. Walls began to fall, hearts began to open. And for the first time in a very, very long time, Westbridge Enterprises finally had something money could never buy: a soul. In the days that followed, the halls of Westbridge Enterprises felt different. Not overnight, not by magic, but change had begun. Mr. Harris, the man who once laughed at Charlotte, found himself standing before the new leadership board, given one clear choice: adapt or step aside. Some employees, those who had built their careers on arrogance and favoritism, quietly chose to leave, but many stayed, grateful for the second chance to build something real, something better. Promotions were no longer handed out based on appearances or favoritism. Instead, Charlotte implemented a simple principle: character first, contribution second, clothing never. One young woman, the same receptionist who had once ignored Charlotte, now worked earnestly under a mentorship program Charlotte personally created, learning, growing, changing. And the security guard, a man who had shown Charlotte a small act of kindness that morning, was promoted to head of facilities management. Charlotte made sure that quiet acts of respect were noticed, appreciated, and rewarded. And customers noticed too. Slowly, the reputation of Westbridge Enterprises began to heal. People weren't just doing business with the company anymore. They were believing in it. Believing in the idea that success didn't have to mean stepping on others. Believing that you could wear sneakers or heels, a hoodie or a three-piece suit, and still be treated like you mattered. Inside those polished glass walls, a new kind of energy grew. One built on respect, kindness, integrity. Westbridge Enterprises wasn't just back on its feet. It was soaring higher than ever. And it all started with one woman. A woman in simple jeans and worn sneakers, who had the courage to walk through the judgment and change an empire from the inside out. It's easy to judge people by what we see, by the clothes they wear, by the car they drive, by the way they walk into a room. But the truth is, what matters most is what we don't see right away: their heart, their resilience, their quiet strength. Charlotte Monroe's story reminds us all of a simple truth. Greatness doesn't come wrapped in luxury. It shines through in the way we treat others when we think no one important is watching. The world doesn't need more people who look important. It needs more people who act with kindness, humility, and quiet courage. So, the next time you see someone who doesn't fit your idea of success, stop. Look a little closer. You might just be looking at the person who could change your world. Because respect isn't something people earn by wearing the right outfit. Respect is something every human being deserves, from the moment they walk through the door. Thank you for watching this story. If this touched your heart, we invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us, have you ever been judged unfairly by your appearance? We would love to hear your experience. And if you believe that true strength comes from within, hit that like button, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and always remember, it's not the clothes you wear that make you powerful. It's the heart you carry into the world.